Mage Detective Andre by Aina A. Okoro. Act 1, Episode 1, A Grim Night. On a snow-blanketed section of West 17th Avenue, grimly nicknamed Grim Avenue, two men locked eyes in a tense standoff on a frigid winter night. The detective had returned to his hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, following a lead on the elusive fugitive Miguel Juan Julio Ramirez. Somehow, the city had gotten even more run down than when he had last seen it. Not to his surprise, his cover had been blown by someone he thought he could trust. Instead, he had found himself surrounded by the new gang syndicate that claims to be in charge of Cleveland. The poor fools had believed they could outmaneuver the detective with numbers, but they would have needed at least 50 more mages to even make him break a sweat. Scattered across the icy streets were the incapacitated bodies of nearly 20 Romano gang members, some unconscious, others possibly dead, each one a testament to the detective's unrelenting might and ferocity. For him, they had been little more than a warm-up. Their feeble resistance were no match for his skill. A large, towering man had approached the detective with an unnerving calmness. This man had recently been classified as a highly dangerous criminal, ranked Class A, just one level below their highest designation of Class F. The tall man, a clean-shaven Caucasian likely in his late 30s, carried an air of authority as he faced the detective. With chiseled cheekbones and jet-black hair, his imposing stature and peak physical form hinted at a past worthy of being a mythic pro-athlete. Clad in a sharp black suit that radiated the presence of a don, he exuded power and control. When he spoke, his deep, commanding voice reverberated through the icy air.
"You have no jurisdiction here, Detective. This is Romano turf, and you're trespassing."
Spoken like a man with a sense of possession over areas he knew little about. Amid the biting winter night, the detective stood clad in streetwear, baggy sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, attire that appeared suited for the weather, yet felt oddly too light. As he pulled back his hood, his face emerged, a lean black man, approximately 6 feet tall, with piercing black eyes, neatly cropped hair, and youthful features that contrasted sharply with his calm and resolute demeanor. The detective responded with a tone of aggression.
"You all think you can run shit, run this country, but this city, these streets, this community, they all belong to the people you terrorize. I'm here to give it all back one way or another."
The detective drew his wand from the depths of his kangaroo hoodie pocket, unveiling the gleaming gold-coated Hikarasu Hachi. Its sleek Japanese craftsmanship was a testament to the country's artistic legacy. Forged from the centuries-old wood of a sacred sakura tree, the wand bore the legacy of unparalleled speed and razor-sharp precision in spellcasting, yet its low magical output demanded mastery and finesse over sheer power, traits the detective embodied with ease, a reward for closing a high-profiled case in the land of the rising sun. Just by holding the wand, his clothes magically transformed. From sweatpants and a hoodie, he was now in proper attire, sporting a knee-length, flowing light brown cloak jacket that shimmered in the dim moonlight, paired with a cream-colored suit vest over a lighter long-sleeve white shirt. Dark charcoal grey pants completed the outfit, giving the detective a modern, sleek aesthetic look that radiated refined elegance. On the top right corner of the detective's cloak jacket were the initials MIRA. From it, a brilliant white beam illuminated the frosty night, cutting across the falling snow before bursting into a vivid spectacle. High above, a particled bald eagle, in striking red, white, and blue, took shape like a firework, its wings spread wide in a commanding display, the unmistakable emblem of the Magical Intelligence and Regulation Agency, MIRA for short. More than just a symbol, it was a proclamation, a stark warning to those who dared to defy the law, and a shining beacon of hope for those longing to escape the grip of fear. The tall man scowled, his face twisting with annoyance as he regarded the detective.
You detectives,
He sneered, shaking his head in contempt.
especially you mirror dogs. You call us criminals, gangsters, banes. But the real criminals? It's you government assholes and the damned government itself, always wanting to control everything while giving nothing in return. I feed my people. I protect my people. You don't do shit. People like you are the real oppressors. Me? I'm a liberator.
The detective chuckled softly, showing an obvious display of sarcasm.
Spoken like a true, self-righteous Don. You stand there, claiming to be for the people, a so-called liberator, but let me ask you something.
As he stepped closer, his expression shifting to one of incredulous disdain.
Why did a mother have to bury her son, an innocent young man murdered by one of your thugs simply for not paying the Romano tax? What kind of liberator demands high taxes from the very people you claim to protect?
His words were sharp, laced with disbelief that this man could paint himself as a savior while his reputation dripped with blood and ruthless control.
You're no liberator. You're just another killer in a suit.
The Don smirked, a sly, almost prideful expression creeping across his face as he stared down the detective. There was no denial in his eyes, no protest to the accusations hurled at him. Deep down, he knew the detective was right. He was no liberator. He was a villain, a warlord, a true Don in every sense of the word. And in his own twisted way, he reveled in it. The power, the fear, the wealth, the control. It is an empire built on blood, murder, drugs, and broken promises, and he owned it like a badge of honor. For the detective, this was profoundly personal. Cleveland wasn't just a city, it was his home. Growing up less than a mile from Grim Avenue, his life had been shaped by this broken community. The streets had taken his father, a righteous man according to his mother, before Richard was even old enough to speak. He vividly remembered his mother's relentless efforts, working grueling hours to provide for him and his older sister. He also recalled the moment he learned his uncle had become a gang leader, not for personal gain, but to protect him and his sister, giving them the chance to focus on school without the constant threat of the streets. There was a time before the Romano family's arrival when the gangs were less bold. Recruiting children under the age of 8 had been an unspoken taboo, but this new wave of criminal imperialism cast an even darker shadow across the nation. Cleveland had become one of the most devastated cities, its neighborhoods overrun by ruthless gangs, each answering to a Don like the one the detective now confronted. The people who had once shaped his life, friends, neighbors, mentors, were gone, swallowed by violence, consumed by addiction, or lost to the gangs themselves. Taking down a gang member, and more importantly, a Don, wasn't just a mission. It was a way to better his community. The detective's expression steadied, his posture shifting into a poised, ready stance that radiated calm, yet unshakable conviction. With his wand leveled at the Don, his voice rang resolute.
I'm taking you in. Mirror Detective 725, Richard Wring, hereby places you under arrest. Put your hands on your head where I can see them.
The Don threw his head back, a wide smile spreading across his face as he chuckled with delight.
You're him,
He exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with manic excitement.
Detective 725, the famed Grim Reaper, Richard Wring. The only detective who has killed more than he has arrested.
If you know who I am,
Richard said coldly, his wand steady and glowing brighter.
then you know it's in your best interest not to resist. Put your arms above your head. I will not tell you again.
His voice laced with an unspoken promise of swift action. The wand in his hand hummed with barely contained energy, poised to strike the moment the Don made one wrong move.
You don't understand.
The Don said, his smirk widening even more.
I'm a new Don. My name hasn't reached many ears yet. But if I kill the Grim Reaper himself...
He paused, letting the gravity of his words hang in the frosty air.
Then the name Lorenzo Romano will be known as the one who defied death.
With a flash of movement, faster than most would expect from a man of his size, Lorenzo pulled a wand from beneath his tailored suit jacket. Its dark wood glinted ominously in the faint light, ready to clash with the golden brilliance of the Hikarasu Hachi. The detective didn't hesitate for even a second. Once someone identified for arrest displays aggression, like drawing a wand, it is classified as a criminal act, justifying the use of deadly magical force. Without missing a beat, Richard fired off a blinding white bolt of magical energy from his wand. The spell flew through the snowy air, faster than a streak of lightning, slamming directly into the Don's shoulder. Lorenzo staggered back, his polished shoes scuffing against the icy pavement, the impact landing with the force of a strong, heavy punch. Yet the attack had little effect. He had managed to cast a mythic skin, which embedded his entire body in a slim, shimmering magical barrier just in time, the faint glow of his shield rippling as it absorbed the brunt of the magic energy, leaving only slight kinetic energy to be felt. A smirk tugged at his lips again, his confidence unwavering.
Damn,
He growled, his voice tinged with challenge.
that kinda hurt. But you know it's going to take more than that Grim Reaper.
The Don brandished an Italiano de Luca Nebrodensis wand, a masterpiece of craftsmanship forged from an Abies nebrodensis tree. Renowned for its exceptional balance of power and speed, the wand also carried a unique affinity for amplifying the abilities of mages skilled with earth-based magic. Its design was nothing short of exquisite, I must admit. The sleek edges at its tip, outlined in vibrant crimson, combined with its clean lines and pristine shine, showcased the unmistakable artistry of the famed Italian wand maker, Federico De Luca. The wand was further enhanced by 3 augmentation slots meticulously carved into its frame, allowing for the insertion of powerful magical amplifiers to boost its potency even further. The detective's eyes narrowed as he caught sight of the faint, intricate stones in the augmented slots of the Don's wand. They shimmered faintly under the cold moonlight, their purpose hidden but unmistakably ominous. They were rune stones which are illegal. A wand of this caliber was more than a conduit tool of magic energy. It was a statement of power and prestige. Its value likely exceeded over 10 million American dollars. In Lorenzo Romano's hand, it was a deadly weapon, and he held it with the demeanor of someone who knew exactly how to wield it. The sight of the Don's wand sent a slight ripple of concern through the detective. Though technically a legal wand in the United States, this particular Nebrodensis wand had the potential to be far more dangerous than it appeared. If its limiter seal had been tampered with, which it most likely was a common practice among those in the underworld, its magical output could easily exceed 13 kilowatts of magic energy, equivalent to the destructive force of a rocket launcher. Richard had faced Dons before, men of power, ruthlessness, and skill, but he had never lost. Each Don he had encountered had been a unique challenge, a deadly game of wits and combat. Being a Don wasn't just about commanding fear and respect. It demanded a mastery in magic, far surpassing the abilities of any ordinary criminal mage. To hold such a title meant being a force to be reckoned with in every confrontation. But Richard wasn't just an ordinary mage himself. He was a prestigious federal magic officer of top rank, who bore the weight of enforcing the law with honed magical expertise that came along with it. Being a part of Mira wasn't just about a badge or a title. It was a testament to relentless training, unmatched precision, and the ability to adapt in the face of overwhelming odds. The Don's voice, resonated with power, pointing his wand at the concrete ground as he began to speak an enchantment spell.
Kasva ungla zon.
The snow-dusted concrete near his feet trembled violently, shards and clusters of the broken road rising into the air, swirling with malevolent intent. The debris began to mold and twist, taking shape into something far more dangerous. Richard reacted instantly, his wand sparking with energy as he unleashed rapid, precise shots of white ether magic. Each bolt streaked toward the forming masses, striking with explosive accuracy and evaporating several clusters before they could solidify. Yet, despite his quick thinking, a handful of the constructs managed to evade destruction. The surviving clusters coalesced, shaping themselves into hulking concrete golems. Their jagged forms glistened with frost as they roared to life, their glowing cores pulsating with magical energy. Without hesitation, they charged toward Richard, their speed defying their massive, lumbering frames. The ground quaked beneath their thunderous steps, the battle escalating into a deadly clash of man versus summoned monstrosities. The detective had already fortified his defense with mythic skin, mirroring the Don's defensive barrier and ensuring he was prepared for the attack.
Morlan Yorin Zebiki Jul.
He shouted, his voice echoing in the icy air. From his wand erupted a torrent of water, twisting and writhing like a serpent, forming a deadly, fluid whip. With every precise strike, the water whip tore through the advancing concrete golems, shattering their crude forms into harmless rubble. The detective moved swiftly, evading their powerful punches as they closed in, his experience evident in his fluid movements and pinpoint accuracy. But one of the golems moved differently. Its steps were uneven, its reactions unnervingly deliberate, almost as if it had intelligence guiding its actions. Richard's strikes lashed out, but the creature evaded them with uncanny precision. Something was off about this one. And then he saw it, a left hand holding a wand. It was none other than the Don himself. Lorenzo had used magic to conceal himself with rubble, using the crumbled concrete to encase his body like armor, turning himself into a look-alike version of one of his summoned monstrosities. He had charged forward with the strength of a brute and the cunning of a seasoned mage. The Don's strategy paid off as he retaliated for the earlier hit to his shoulder. With his concrete-encrusted fist, he delivered a good punch to the detective's left cheek, the impact fierce enough to knock Richard back a full 15 feet, slamming him to the snowy ground. Richard shook off the blow quickly, his mythic skin having absorbed most of the kinetic force. The strike was powerful to jar Richard, but not enough to cause lasting damage. Still, he knew staying grounded for too long would be a mistake. The Don wasted no time using the crumbled concrete that surrounded his body like armor to launch a volley of heavy projectiles. Each piece of rubble flew with force, a relentless follow-up attack.
Knee palm,
Richard commanded, aiming his wand at the ground. A sudden gust of wind erupted from his wand, propelling him high into the air and safely out of the path of the incoming concrete barrage. From his elevated position, he prepared his counter.
Rogunga La.
He convoked another spell, this one giving him a huge boost of strength. The adrenaline-like rush was immense as he prepared for an upfront strike. Lorenzo, ever the strategist, wasn't far behind.
Rogonga la.
He copied the spell, augmenting his own strength in response. Richard used knee palm again from his high elevation to create a wind burst that propelled him straight toward the Don at incredible speed. The air whistled around him as he closed the distance, his left fist poised for a decisive blow. The Don quickly braced himself, crossing his arms in front of his face in full guard, perfectly anticipating the detective's trajectory. Richard's punch landed squarely on the Don's reinforced arms, protecting his face, the impact reverberating through the street with a deafening crack. The force vibrated through the Don's body, numbing his arms a bit despite the added protection of his mythic skin and the Rogongola enhancement. The Don slightly grimaced in pain, his face betraying the effort it took to hold his ground, but he neither fell nor faltered, standing firm in the face of Richard's powerful punch. The Don smiled at Richard, the realization dawning on him that by getting close enough to land a touch, Richard had unknowingly helped him complete the second phase of Kaz Far Ungla Yum Zan, a spell the Don had personally developed as an evolution of the standard Advanced Earth Golem spell, Kaz Rafa Zan. The Don seized Richard's clothing with his left hand, bypassing the detective's shield with a deft motion. Before Richard could fully react, Lorenzo pressed the tip of his wand against Richard's right forearm. Acting on instinct, Richard had twisted his body just enough to avoid Lorenzo's intended target, his wand, but not enough to evade the touch entirely. A cold, heavy sensation spread instantly through Richard's arm immediately as his flesh began to slowly petrify, solidifying into unyielding stone. The weight of it threatened to throw off his balance, but Richard adapted quickly. With practiced precision, he shifted his wand to his left hand before the effects could spread to his wand. The battle had just become complicated for the detective. Lorenzo, having let go of the detective to avoid his own spell spreading onto him, had allowed for Richard to swiftly fall back, taking measured steps backwards to create distance. Richard's movements were deliberate, his left hand now gripping his wand tightly as magical energy began to coalesce at its tip, crackling with intensity. Noticing the growing power, the Don's eyes sharpened, his earlier confidence flickering for a brief moment. He held his position, refraining from advancing, his hesitation revealing a cautious respect for whatever spell the detective was preparing.
I guess this solves the mystery of why the last Don of this region was found petrified in stone pieces,
the detective said, his eyes locked in on the Don.
He had gotten too old, too weak-minded.
Lorenzo said coldly, his voice devoid of remorse.
So I simply did what he taught me.
There was no hesitation in his words, no hint of regret, only the ruthless logic of a man shaped by a cutthroat world. Lorenzo had been raised to be cruel, to seize power by any means necessary, and he embraced that philosophy with every fiber of his being.
Maintaining power in this region wasn't easy. After his death, countless other Dons fought me for control of these parts. I had lost many men before they finally realized this territory belonged to me. That's how I earned the title of Don.
The small talk had served its purpose, buying the detective enough time to gather the magic energy needed for a healing spell and to formulate a new plan of attack. Yet the challenge before him was unlike any he had faced. The Don had so far shown no weaknesses. His defense was strong, his magic power unwavering, and his magic skill far exceeded that of any other criminal mage Richard had encountered. Adding to the tension was the unsettling, sinister aura emanating from Lorenzo's wand. It pulsed faintly, an ominous energy that seemed to seep into the air, thickening the atmosphere with its malevolence. Richard couldn't pinpoint its source or purpose, but one thing was clear: whatever it was, it only made Lorenzo more dangerous. So far, the detective had managed to identify two of the runes augmenting the Don's wand, an earth rune and a shadow rune. However, the third rune was a mystery, and the source of the sinister aura that the detective was sure of. Throughout the entire fight, Lorenzo had kept it carefully concealed, his thumb positioned on top of it to deliberately obscure it from the detective's eyes. Richard didn't miss this intentionality of the act.
Kin Yama Jos Ni Umbra ihari maklie tamo.
Richard chanted, his voice steady as he focused the stored energy into a high-level healing spell. The magic surged through his body, targeting the petrification on his right arm. The spell worked, partially. It managed to stop the stonification from advancing, but the portion of Richard's arm already turned to stone remained solid, unremovable, and unbearably heavy. As the truth sank in, he clenched his teeth. This wasn't a typical petrification spell. It reeked of curse magic, what some called voodoo magic. The complexity of such a curse suggested that Lorenzo had likely sacrificed parts of his soul to wield it. This attack was far more insidious than Richard had anticipated. Remaining calm, the Don had watched as Richard casted the healing spell, choosing not to interfere. He permitted it with full confidence that it would fail. Another calculated move, showcasing his cunningness. The healing spell, powerful as it was, demanded a significant amount of magic energy. The Don's smirk widened as he noticed the telltale signs of exertion, Richard's brow glistening with sweat, his breathing becoming heavier. The spell had put a dent to the detective's stamina, tilting the battle in Lorenzo's favor. He didn't need brute force to win. He was content to outmaneuver Richard. Lorenzo knew that so far he was winning. The Don wasted no time, firing an ether bolt from his wand aimed directly at Richard. The detective swiftly moved to his left, effortlessly evading the attack. He knew better than to take a direct hit. Even with the protection of his magically reinforced skin, it's always smarter to dodge. Richard retaliated, unleashing his own volley of ether bolts toward the Don. Lorenzo could care less about dodging, taking a couple of the shots head-on for his magic skin to absorb it. While it's always better to dodge, Lorenzo wanted to see if he could demoralize the detective's resolve. Richard had skillfully pushed Lorenzo back with the ether bolts, driving him off the street and onto the lawn of an unlucky homeowner. With a commanding utterance of Kaz-Ra Tech, Richard unleashed a spell that summoned roots from the earth, surging up to ensnare the Don. Lorenzo found himself completely ensnared, his body tightly gripped by the relentless roots trying to crush him. With a forceful chant of Rogongala, he invoked the spell once more, summoning immense brute strength to shatter his bonds. However, the toll was immediate. Using the taxing spell twice in this fight left Lorenzo's body throbbing with pain, every muscle aching as if he was suffering from an unbearable case of extreme muscle soreness.
Zulwavagar, Zulwavagar, Zulwavagar.
Lorenzo unleashing a rapid succession of lightning strikes at the detective. The spell required minimal magical energy to cast, allowing him to fire off the attacks with speed and relentlessness. Richard tried to dodge, but he was too slow, taking the full brunt of each lightning strike. While the attacks didn't cause any significant harm, they gradually wore down the protective resilience of his mythic skin, leaving him more vulnerable with every hit. Richard's mind churned with a grim realization. His petrified right arm would lead to his downfall. Each attempt to dodge became a struggle against the dead weight, the lifeless limbs slowing his movements and pulling him off balance. Sharp, throbbing pain radiated from the cursed arm, amplifying his fatigue with every step. Every movement sapped more of his energy, and Lorenzo knew it. The Don remained calculated and composed, his calm demeanor unshaken amidst the chaos of their duel. He was content to let Richard exhaust himself, turning the fight into a battle of endurance and attrition. Richard, on the other hand, was acutely aware of his dwindling stamina, every strained movement a reminder that his limits were being pushed faster than he could recover.
It looks like you're getting a bit slow and tired there, Mr. Reaper. I want to remind you there are no breaks in a street fight.
Lorenzo taunting Richard, using any underhand tactic he can use to gain an advantage.
Screw it!
Richard growled, his voice sharp with resolve. As he continued to dodge the relentless barrage of magical bolts coming from the Don, he made a split-second decision. He released his mythic skin, relinquishing its protective layer. Without hesitation, he aimed his wand at his own petrified right arm and unleashed a concentrated blade of raw magic energy, slicing his right arm completely off. The stone arm dropped to the ground and shattered into crumpled chunks.
Pit!
Richard chanted, the words spilling out with urgency to stop the bleeding. A burst of healing magic enveloped the wound, cauterizing the limb in an instant. The searing pain shot through his body, but Richard didn't flinch. There was no time for hesitation. His breathing was ragged, sweat was pouring from his head, but he felt lighter now, his shackle quite literally gone. It was a bold, desperate move, but one that freed him from the weight of his petrified limb, giving him a chance to regain movement in this fight. The Don froze, his barrage of magical attacks ceased, as he stared at Richard in stunned disbelief.
You severed your arm without so much as a flicker of pain crossing your face. Every other man I've struck with that petrification spell, they'd rather let it consume them than entertain the thought of losing a limb.
He chuckled, shaking his head in reluctant respect.
But you're something else. You have my respect, Detective.
There was no doubt the detective was in immense pain. The searing agony of cutting off his own arm burned through him like wildfire, but adrenaline also coursed through his veins, not allowing him to utter so much as a groan. He didn't want to give Lorenzo any satisfaction of seeing him falter. Although he conveyed a calm aura on the outside, beneath his stoic exterior, he was even more pissed than before. He was desperately trying to control the fiery rage coursing through him. The pain in his arm, the exhaustion from the fight, and the Don's smug arrogance had pushed him past the point of any restraint. He was going to kill him, he thought to himself. Any lingering thought of taking Lorenzo Romano alive had evaporated from Richard's mind. Richard had taken this fight seriously from the beginning, but now he was really serious.
I give you my arm,
The detective said, his voice low and venomous.
but in return I'm going to take something of far greater value from you. Your life.
The words hung in the air like a promise of doom, and for the first time, the Don felt the intensity of the Grim Reaper's magic energy send goosebumps down his skin. Richard raised his wand to his lips, the motion quietly slow, his eyes never leaving the Don. With a sharp, fast, low commanding voice, he whispered to his wand.
Vio Fayum Ne Helix.
He blew sharply onto the tip of his wand, and from it erupted a wide, roaring blaze. The inferno surged forward, devouring everything in its path. Snow vanished in an instant, gravel cracked and splintered under the intense heat, and grass disintegrated into ash. The flames advanced with unyielding ferocity, their sweeping breadth leaving no room for escape. The fiery wave engulfed Lorenzo, its scorching heat shrouding him in thick, intense, choking fire. The battlefield transformed into a blazing inferno.
Toi, Jules win!
The Don screamed out, his voice strained as the flames clawed at him. Desperately, he waved his wand through the air, attempting to dispel the fire that raged around him. But instead of extinguishing the inferno, the spell backfired spectacularly. The flames seemed to surge, igniting even harder, their intensity doubling as the fire had fed on the magical energy of Lorenzo's spell. The Don staggered, his confident arrogance having changed into genuine worry. His teeth clenched and his mind raced for a counter. This wasn't just some ordinary fire spell. It was something far more powerful, meant to overcome conventional defenses.
What is this?
The Don muttered, his voice tinged with unease as the flames roared even hotter, licking at his body with relentless fury.
This shouldn't be happening.
His mind grappling with the realization that Richard's fire was getting stronger by every second.
Morlin, Pierre Yama, Toe.
But before Lorenzo could finish the incantation for a powerful water spell, a sudden surge of electricity coursed through him. The force sent his body into uncontrollable convulses. Although he felt only a portion of the shock, the fact that he felt the effects of the lightning spell at all meant his magic skin was weak. Lorenzo struggled to rise, but his body betrayed him, trembling under the lingering electrical charge. The Don was truly vulnerable, yet he never lost control of his wand. The detective had hit the Don with the shock lightning spell, Zul Delino Gratusma. Lorenzo was reeling. True to his name, the Grim Reaper was preparing to usher the Don to the afterlife. Lorenzo thought to himself desperately,
If I don't use it, I will die. This fire spell, it's different. It will consume me.
Indeed, he was right. It was an unnatural fire spell, almost undispellable, and any spell used to dispel it only makes it stronger. A spell that would likely get Richard kicked out of Mira if they knew he used such a thing. Lorenzo had to do something fast. His only protection to the full might of the fire, his mythic skin, was weakening. He could feel his skin burn in areas his barrier was at its weakest. Soon he may die in crispy fashion. Determined to accelerate the process of Lorenzo's mythic skin-turning void, the detective relentlessly fired ether bolts at him. Each bolt slammed into the Don, sending him staggering backward. One shot caught him square in the chest, knocking him off his balance. The follow-up strikes sent him tumbling further back, his body hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The Grim Reaper's onslaught was unyielding, a masterclass in maintaining pressure against an opponent who now looked far less invincible. He had no choice. Each time he used this power, it took a piece of his mind and soul from him. But better use the power than die, Lorenzo conceded. With a deliberate motion, he uncovered his thumb from the final rune etched into his wand, releasing a surge of strong, negative magic energy from his wand into his body. The air around them grew thick and oppressive, the dark energy pulsating with a malevolence Richard had never encountered before. Its presence was overwhelming, radiating a nauseating aura that made the detective's stomach churn, fighting back the urge to vomit. The smell of decay and the suffocating weight of the energy nearly brought Richard to his knees. For a brief moment, fear gripped him so tightly that he froze. His continuous barrage of attacks halted. The surge of negative energy rippled through the battlefield, extinguishing the cursed fire that had been consuming Lorenzo. However, the Don wasn't unscathed. He stood hunched over, breathing heavily, his chest heaving with exertion. Sweat dripped from his brow, mixing with the soot that clung to his burned skin. The remnants of his once pristine suit were charred and tattered, exposing patches of scorched flesh beneath. The cursed flames had penetrated his weakened mythic skin, searing him just enough before the negative energy had been unleashed. As he stood up, Lorenzo spoke with a voice that rumbled with a chilling demonic resonance.
Detective, have you ever seen demon magic?
As the words left his lips, his transformation became undeniable. His eyes glowed with a fiery crimson red, the pupils narrowing into slits like those of a predator. From his forehead erupted two sharp, jagged devil horns, curling slightly as if shaped by the essence of pure malice. A faint red smoke swirled around him, seeping from his body like a living entity. tainting the air with its sinister aura. The atmosphere grew heavier, more oppressive, as Lorenzo's power took on a terrifying new form. His smirk was no longer human. It was a twisted, devilish grin, filled with evil. Richard didn't dignify the question with a response. Rather, he was a bit too shook to answer. The figure standing before him wasn't Lorenzo Romano anymore, nor the Don he had been battling. What stood before him was something of make-believe. A demon. Richard regathered himself, raised his wand, and fired a volley of ether shots. But as the bolts struck Demon Lorenzo, they fizzled harmlessly, dissipating into the air as smoke. What made it more alarming was that there was no magic skin shielding him now. The attack simply slid off his transformed body as if the magic itself had no effect. Richard's jaw tightened, his mind racing. Whatever this form was, it operated on an entirely different level of power, defying the rules of magic he had relied on so far. How did Lorenzo get a hold of this power? The question burned in Richard's mind as he stared at the transformed Don. This wasn't just a higher level of magic, it was something entirely different, something darker and far more sinister. He had never seen or heard of a mage wielding such a force, and whatever it was, it had no place in the natural order of magic.
Gaium idiom,
Lorenzo intoned with a deep, guttural reverberance, his wand trembling as it unleashed an unnatural force. In front of him, a swirling black portal of smoke tore open, radiating an abyssal energy that seemed to claw at the very air around it. From the portal emerged a hellish pack of demon dogs, their forms twisted and terrifying. Their fiery heads burned with an otherworldly glow, flames licking at their skeletal features. Drool mixed with molten embers dripped from their snarling jaws, their overhanging fangs glistening in the eerie light. Their red eyes, glowing like molten coals, locked onto Richard with an insatiable hunger for flesh. The beasts poured out in droves, their claws scraping against the ground as they charged toward Richard, their growls and howls echoing like the wails of the damned. The detective gritted his teeth, his wand at the ready, knowing this was no ordinary threat. These creatures weren't just meant to kill, they were meant to devour. Just as he had with the golems, Richard relied on the water whip spell to defend himself.
Morlin, Yorin, Zebiki Jul.
He shouted, his wand emanating a stream of water that twisted and coiled. He swung the whip at the first charging demon dog, striking it squarely across its fiery form. But nothing happened. The water whip dissipated instantly upon contact with the creature, evaporating into a useless mist. Richard's eyes widened in disbelief. His spell had not only failed, but the mere touch of the demon dog had nullified it entirely. Before he could react, the first ungodly beast lunged, sinking its fiery jaws into his right leg. Pain shot through his body as the creature's searing fangs bit into him, smoke rising from the wound. A second hellhound got to his other leg, and before he knew, both demonic creatures were trying to rip him apart. More demon dogs were closing in, their glowing eyes and gnashing teeth promising a grisly fate. Richard's life flickered before him, a vivid montage of memories. His wife's gentle smile, his two boys' laughter. The ache of missing them surged through him, sharper now than ever. He had been warned, mirror detectives should never have families. But love defies warnings, transcending rules and reason. How he longed to see his sons again, to hold his wife in his arms one last time. But deep down, he knew the truth. Only one spell remained within his grasp, a final, desperate act of power. With his wand thrust toward the sky, his voice tore through the air.
Royana Pragala.
Screeching, a torrent of ether energy cascaded from the heavens, surging through him as if he were a living conduit. The raw, magical force burst outward like an ocean tidal wave of pure power, radiating from his very being. The impact was immediate. All the demon dogs were thrown back, their fiery forms writhing as the energy enveloped them. One by one, they let out guttural, otherworldly howls before dissipating into thick, swirling black smoke, their existence snuffed out by the overwhelming power of the spell. However, the spell had taken its toll. Richard's chest heaved as he fell to one knee, his reserves of magic energy depleted. The grand burst of ether energy had been powerful, but draining, leaving him completely vulnerable in the aftermath. Before he could fully register his exhaustion, a blur of motion caught his eye. Lorenzo moved in with immense speed, his demonic form a streak of crimson and black. In almost the blink of an eye, he was standing directly in front of Richard, his wand mere inches from the detective's face. Richard's eyes widened, his mind racing, but his body felt heavy, sluggish from the strain of the fight.
Gabbana!
Lorenzo bellowed, unleashing a destructive surge of demonic energy. The impact struck Richard with overwhelming force, crashing into him like an unyielding avalanche and flinging him violently backward. His body hit the concrete with brutal momentum, bouncing several times as if he were nothing more than a discarded rag doll. What little of his mythic skin he had left was gone. The energy had torn through the skin on his forehead, disintegrating his hair and revealing the bone of his exposed skull beneath. Smoke rose from the raw, seared wound, and blood trickled down his face. The Grim Reaper was done. Yet, despite the intensity and sheer brutality of the attack, he remained barely conscious. Lorenzo, still cautious but now deeply respectful, approached the fallen detective. He kept his guard up, but his expression was one of genuine admiration.
To still be conscious after taking that spell point blank.
Lorenzo muttered to himself, his crimson eyes narrowing.
You are indeed a great mage.
Lorenzo could feel the strain in his body, the corrosive nature of the demonic energy beginning to take its toll. His movements were still sharp, but the edges of exhaustion were creeping in. His mind began to move towards madness. Yet even as the dark power gnawed at him, he couldn't deny the respect he felt for Richard, a man who had pushed him further than anyone ever had.
To make me use this,
Lorenzo uttered, his crimson eyes flickering with both pride and irritation.
the legacy of the Grim Reaper will live forever.
Lorenzo knelt on one knee beside the battered, broken body of the detective. The fight was over, and he finally felt secure enough to begin shedding his demonic form. His voice, steady and almost reverent, broke the silence as he spoke.
I will not keep you waiting too
Long outside heaven's door.
He said, almost remorseful.
You are the strongest mage I have ever fought, and so I will grant you one dying request.
Richard, his breaths shallow and labored, mustered what little strength he had left. His voice was faint, each word a struggle.
Do not kill my sons. Please, do not kill them.
Lorenzo was silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his tone resolute.
I cannot promise you I will not kill them. If they come for my life, I will defend myself. But I will steady my wand and show them mercy, one time, and one time only. This I can promise you.
He rose to his feet, looking down at the fallen detective with genuine admiration.
Farewell, Grim Reaper.
And with that, the battle was over. The legendary Richard Wring of the Magical Intelligence and Regulation Agency had fallen in a duel against Lorenzo Romano. The death of Richard Wring was almost 2 years ago. Now, at 18 years old, Andre, Richard's oldest son, was ready to take his first steps toward becoming a mage detective. The weight of his father's legacy was large, but Andre was determined. His decision to pursue a career as a mirror detective had been made years before his father's passing, against Richard's wishes, no less. Even as a child, he had resolved to follow this path, but now it was driven by an unshakable need to honor his family and seek justice. The journey to becoming a mirror detective would be no easy venture. The Mirror Academy was infamous for its grueling challenges, pushing candidates to their limits with extreme tests of magic skill, intelligence, and morality. Only the most exceptional mages were hand-selected, and even few of them made it through. Andre knew the road ahead would be treacherous. Still, he was ready. Driven by both his father's memory and his own resolve, Andre was prepared to face whatever trials awaited him, even if it meant a life of life or death. For Andre Wring, the stakes couldn't be higher. The son of the legendary Richard Wring, he carried both the weight of his father's legacy and the burden of his own unshakable determination. You've reached the end of the audio story. Thank you for listening to Mage Detective Andre, Episode 1, A Grim Night. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe to stay informed about upcoming chapters. In the next episode, follow Andre as he takes on the challenge of auditioning for Mira, embarking on his journey to become a federal mage detective.